Story time when I heard La Llorona in Mexico. This happened when I was around 13, 12, 11 years old. I don't really remember how old I was, but I was around that age when I heard La Llorona. That was like a chore in Mexico to take care of the animals, of giving them food, taking them to the monte. And monte is a forest where you take the animals. It's like a lot of bushes and there's like hills in Mexico where I lived. And a lot of bushes, so we had to go deep in the monte where we could find a lot of grass so the sheep could eat grass. And our job was to make sure to keep all the goats in a circle and making sure they don't go on their own. This specific day, only me and my brother went to go to the monte, and that day we were in charge of taking the goats, the sheep, to the monte, to the forest, and we started heading our way. Me and my brother were making sure that the goats were all gathered together, making sure we didn't lose no goats, because if we did lose any of the goats, the sheep would be in big trouble with my mom, because the goats were like food, money towards my family. So if we lost goats, we lost money. That day, me and my brother lost 3 goats, not 1 but 3, so that was a big no to my mom. So I knew that if I would get home, I would be in big trouble. So what I decided to do was to not go home. My brother, on the other hand, left home with the goats of the remaining goats. I didn't. I stayed. Keep in mind, me and my brother lost 3 goats. Keep in mind the number 3 towards the end of the story. I decided to go home, but not really. Like, I was close near to my house, but it was still around the monte. So where I live, it's a bunch of monte surrounding my house. It's like a lot of land, but surrounding with a lot of montes, a lot of forests, a lot of bushes. And it's already turning dark at this point, but I wasn't going home. I just stayed in the monte near my house. My mom started screaming my name so many times and started to say, "Do you want to come with us to your uncle's house? Because he just came back from the USA. We're going to go visit him." I didn't fall for it. In my mind, I thought, what coincidence. Today, my uncle came back from the USA. My mom is calling me out so we can start going to my uncle's house. But the coincidence, today, the day that I lost 3 goats with my brother, they're going to my uncle's house. I'm not gonna fall for it. So I decided to not fall for it, and I just stayed in the monte, still heading close to the house. I dozed off. I didn't even notice if my mom actually went to my uncle's house. Later at night, I started to hear a cry, and the first thing that I thought in my mind, my brother got in trouble. He got yelled at, and he's crying right now. The cry sounded really loud, like it was really close. And the thing is that near my house, we have like a pozo. A pozo is like a well where we drink water from, where the water comes to our house. At that moment that I heard the cries, I wasn't scared because in my mind, it was my brother. So I just stayed by myself hidden until I fell asleep and dozed off. I don't know when the cry stopped. It was the next day, and the first thing I did was go to my brother and ask him, "You were the one who was crying last night." I knew it, you got in trouble. Confronting him. My brother was looking at me confused. "What do you mean? Yesterday, we went to my uncle's house." That's when I told him, "No, I heard you last night crying. You were crying really loud." And that's when my brother said, "No, I wasn't crying last night. I went to my uncle's house with my mom. But my mom was calling your name out and you didn't came with us." It turns out what I have heard was La Llorona. But at that time, at that moment when I heard the cryings, I thought it was my brother. So I wasn't scared at that moment until the next day when I found out that my brother was not the one crying, but it was La Llorona. Keep in mind, that day we lost 3 goats, the number 3. I heard a lot about stuff about the number 3, like paranormal. Also, late at night, where we live, there's a close to our house, a well, a pozo, where there's water. And I heard a whipping cry, and it was La Llorona. Not my brother, but La Llorona. That's what I believe, that I heard La Llorona that night when I heard the whipping cries that what I thought it was my brother. This story is not mine. This story is from my mom. My mom told me this story, and when I heard this story, my mom doesn't talk about any paranormal stuff. And when I heard about this story, I got the chills. I heard this story because all of a sudden, when we were in a gathering with my uncles and family, they started talking about the paranormal in Mexico, what they had experienced. And that's when my mom shared her story about hearing La Llorona when she was around 13, 12 years old. And she thought it was her brother, but turns out what she believes, what she heard, was La Llorona. Comment below if you guys have ever experienced of hearing La Llorona in Mexico when you go visit your family members, or if your mom or parents have heard La Llorona, because I know many have heard La Llorona in Mexico.
A guy named Keegan emailed me and he was like, I have to tell you my experience with encountering the famous ghost La Llorona while visiting my family in Ecuador. I read this story in the middle of the night. I don't know why. I woke up and I checked my emails and I wish I didn't, because this one spooked me. He grew up hearing warnings about messing with dark forces. His family was deeply rooted in their faith. They told him not to mess with Ouija boards, not to do any rituals, and his grandparents even said, don't even speak of evil. These were not abstract fears in his family. His aunts and mother told him stories in trembling voices of things that they had personally experienced. His family's main home was in Ecuador, and it was large, spacious, and it had a lot of unused rooms that seemed to amplify the eerie energy of the house, but it was built like a fortress. It had steel doors, barred windows, and jagged glass along the wall that surrounded the property. They even had a dog that paced around outside guarding for intruders. One night in 2017, Keegan is there hanging out with his cousin who's as close as his brother. They are playing video games, eating snacks. They stay up pretty late in the night, and the night is cold. It's actually abnormally cold for the area, which is right near the towering Chimborazo volcano. I don't know if I said that right. Don't yell at me. They get tired. They go to their room. They share a room. They always do when Keegan visits, and they push their beds together. Keegan's cousin starts dozing off, and Keegan's enjoying the moment of quiet, so he decides he's going to scroll on his phone. And that's when Keegan heard it. It was a faint sound, distant and strange, but it was very clearly a woman's voice, and it seemed to be weeping and shouting at the same time. At first, he thought it was just a drunk person wandering the street, so he brushed it off, but then it was getting closer and louder and more haunting with each passing moment. And the voice was filled with despair of somebody mourning a loss too great to bear. Keegan wakes up his cousin, who tells him that he's just trying to scare him, but then his cousin hears it too. So they're sitting up in bed listening to this wailing voice outside, and it's getting closer and closer. But what freaked them out the most was that their dog in the yard, which was trained to bark at any intruder, was eerily quiet, as if it were cowering or pacified by whatever was outside. And then they're terrified to hear the sound coming from right below their bedroom window. Just the sound of a woman crying and screaming. They work up every nerve in their body to run, but they can't move. So Keegan finally gets the courage to grab his phone, and he calls his mom, who's asleep in the next room. So she comes in. They tell her everything, but by the time she got there, the cries had stopped. That night, everyone returns to their rooms, and Keegan falls into a restless sleep, but his mother stays up to watch over them. She hears Keegan cry out in pain. Michael, let go of my foot. You're hurting me. So she rushes in the room, but she finds both the boys asleep. Next morning, everybody's sitting around the breakfast table talking about the experience, and the family is divided. The grandparents are dismissive, and they say you shouldn't even talk about evil spirits. But as if to mock their dismissal, the basement toilet door just swings wide open. But the story doesn't end there. Over the next few years, there are strange, eerie, unexplainable, and seemingly paranormal experiences that happen all over the house. Handprints appear on second-story windows. Electronics turn on and off by themselves. And one cousin even says that he meets the devil himself. The family still debates if who or what they encountered that night was actually the ghost La Llorona. If you're unfamiliar, she is the legendary weeping woman of Latin American folklore who often shows up near bodies of water. According to the story, she is crying for her lost children who she drowned after her love, who was of a different social status, left her for someone of his own social status. Overcome by heartbreak and rage, she drowns her own children, believing it will free her from her lost love. She was condemned to wander the earth forever, searching for the children so she could finally be free. Of course, I searched for information on La Llorona. Who was this woman? Was she real, and what was her story? First of all, there are many stories over the years of people who swear they've encountered her. In 1995, a taxi cab driver named Jorge was driving through Mexico City in an area famous for its canals when he was flagged down by a woman. She was beautiful, but she was frantic, and Jorge thought she needed help, so he lets her in his cab, and he's driving for a little while when he looks in the rearview mirror and sees that her face isn't human. It's a human skull. He jumps out of the car, and he looks back in the car. She's gone. He later learned that other drivers he knew picked up a similar woman in that same area and had the same experience that night. In 2010, a boy named Mateo was playing near a river in Veracruz with some of his friends when they heard a woman wailing. They went closer to the sound and saw a woman bowed over in the river looking for something. One boy calls out to her and she raised her head, and they saw hollow eyes, a skull, and a mouth that seems too wide. They all swore they could still hear her cries that night even after they got home. Some scholars believe the legend of La Llorona began as a representation of La Malinche, a Nahua woman who acted as a translator and guide for Cortez, a Spanish conquistador who took over the Aztec Empire. This makes sense. La Malinche is seen often as a woman who betrayed her own culture by aiding the Spanish. Therefore, there's a parallel between her maternal role of taking care of her people versus La Llorona drowning her children. But both figures embody deep sorrow. La Malinche mourns the loss of her people and her culture, while La Llorona mourns the loss of her children. Either way, I believe in this. I believe in thought forms, which is the idea that if enough people give a thought form energy, it will manifest in reality. Keegan, thank you so much for sharing your story. Keegan actually did not ask to be anonymous, so he will be tagged in the caption below. If you have any questions, he might be here to answer. Keep sending me your spooky, scary stories, and I will keep doing these and ghostly deep dive. I have polls every day on my Insta where you can vote on the next spooky story I tell.
Why have I never done a Llorona story? This happened in Chicolapan, en el Estado de Mexico. Chicolapan? It happened in Mexico, okay? So this girl's studying to be an architect and says that most of the homework that's given to them is done in groups. She said that most of the time all of her group plans to meet up at a certain friend's house because it's like the same distance to everyone and it's just in the right spot. She also mentions that this girl lives next to a cemetery. She said that the night that she's about to tell us happened was one of those nights where they had to stay up because the homework that they were given was really complicated. Like they couldn't fall asleep, they needed to pay attention at all times, so they had all agreed to stay up as long as they needed in order to finish that work. She says that even though they drank so much coffee and they were trying to keep each other awake, around 3 a.m. they all started getting really tired. One of the friends suggested that maybe we should all go to sleep for at least an hour and then continue after that. She said that even though they didn't want to go to sleep, because what if they stayed asleep and didn't do the homework, they were all so tired that they agreed to sleep for an hour. So everyone started spreading around the room. Some people laid on the floor and she decided to lay on one of the couches. She says that as soon as everybody got quiet to fall asleep for the hour, that's when they heard it. They heard a woman crying from far away. In that moment, they all started laughing because they all said it sounded almost like a scary movie, like those kind of cries and screams from far away. She explains how they weren't scared because they were all together, and even if something was happening outside, it sounded like it was really far away. She says that one of the friends made a comment like, "Oh, now we know what the Llorona sounds like," and they all started laughing. Except for her, because she then starts to think about all those things that people have said about La Llorona. But more specifically, one detail that everybody shares. They say that if you hear La Llorona from far away, that means that she's close to you. But if you hear it close to you, that means that she's far away. A little later, they heard the cry again, but this time it was really close to where they were. She said that this time, hearing her really close to where they were, like almost outside of that door, got everybody scared. All of them at once turned to look at that door, and then they all looked at the windows to make sure they were closed because that's how close they heard her next to them. In that moment, they all turned back to the door because they started hearing some weird sound, and that was when they all saw that the girl's rosary that was hanging on the doorknob was going almost in circles, like if somebody had pushed it or was playing with it. She said that there was no wind or like anything that would have caused that thing to just start moving out of nowhere. After a while, they didn't hear it again, and the girl that owned that house immediately went up the stairs to make sure that her son was okay because he was up there asleep. She said that none of them can go to sleep after that, so they just decided to get up and finish that homework. Now they all joke around that thanks to La Llorona, they were able to finish and pass that class. Can you imagine? Oh, I've never heard anything that's so scary. Anyway, this story is also from Relatos de la Noche. If you want to go listen to it, I'm putting the time and the title that it's at.
This is easily one of the scariest stories that I have ever been sent. So let's talk about a follower's dad and their first-hand encounter with La Llorona. So before the follower was born, their dad actually had a pretty bad problem with drinking. Their mother was often left alone due to this for days and weeks at a time, and now has a severe anxiety disorder because of it. So a bit later, they all moved to America. Their dad fixes their drinking habits, gets a job, and then our follower that sent in this story was born. Now, unfortunately, their father would pass away when they were 13. But before he passed away, he would always make sure that his family took many trips to Mexico so they never lost their culture. Now, this follower follower said that it is pretty common in Mexico for kids to have a lot more independence than they have here. So walking places alone, riding horses places alone was not uncommon for them at the time. So in Mexico, they had a ranch, and there was a giant field that grew corn and things like that, separating their house from their grandmother's. Now, like I said, they said it was really abnormal for them to not be able to go places by themselves, but for some reason, they were not allowed to cross through this field alone to get to their grandmother's house. Now, the corn grew very tall. It was around 6 feet tall. You would pretty much disappear in the corn, but that's not really why they had that rule. So one night, it's just the follower and their dad awake. Everyone else had went to sleep in the house, and they just came out and asked their dad, "Why can I not walk through this field by myself?" After the dad made them promise to never relay to their siblings and their mother that they were told this, he told the story. Let's get into the warning that they were given by their father. So this occurred during the time that he was not sober. He would wander the streets very under the influence to walk home, and he knew when he heard the running water of the creek that was near their home, he was near the house. So this night he wasn't as far gone as he typically was, but he was just trying to get home, and he started to hear the water. He looks forward, and their house is pretty far away. Like, he should not be hearing the water right now. So he starts looking around to see if someone's dumping some water somewhere, but of course no one's outside. It's the middle of the night. He makes the decision to cross through the cornfield to get home, which he typically did not do. He said the warnings that his mother told him as a child flashed through his mind to not really go through here, that it's not safe, but he chalked it up as superstition and stepped foot into the field. The field was usually noisy with crickets and bugs, but this night it was silent. Nature was silent. No. It's never a good sign. There's never anything good happening when nature goes quiet. It was so quiet, he started to hear his own heartbeat speed up. So he stopped and looked around. At this point, he was only about halfway through the field. He feels the air get knocked out of him as he looks forward just a few feet ahead and is met with a woman. He was paralyzed with fear at this point and just stood there looking at her. And I'm gonna tell you how he described her. Good luck ever sleeping again. She had no eyes, but not just empty sockets. There were veins. It looked like someone had taken her eyes, or she had taken her own eyes. Her mouth hung open, tongue gray, teeth completely blackened. Her hair was soaking wet, and she was very, very skinny. Like, it looked like her skin was just barely stretching across her bones, and he could see that through her pelt dress. He started to hear running water again, and he watched as she swayed back and forth, weeping. His instinct kicked in, and he finally looked away from her. He told himself he was just imagining things, that he just needed to get home, so he started to walk away, but the running water and weeping got louder behind him because she was chasing him. As he got closer to the house, the wailing would turn to shrieking as she repeated over and over, "My children, where are my children?" She said it in Spanish, of course. Once he got out of that field, the sound of crickets returned, and he could hear the actual running water from the creek. He hurried in the house, locked the doors behind him, and said, "That is why you are not allowed in that field by yourself ever, and to never play with things that you do not understand." I'm scared all over again. That is my second time reading this, and I am literally terrified again.
A small village in Zacatecas, Mexico. It was 3 a.m. A 15-year-old girl woke up. She really needed to use the bathroom. But the house was old and the bathroom was outside. She was too scared to go alone. So what did she do? She called for her mom. "Mom." Nothing. "Mom." Still nothing. She started getting anxious. She called out louder. And that is when something strange happened. She turned around and saw someone standing at the foot of her bed. It was a woman dressed in white. She was just standing there with both arms spread out, not moving at all. And her face was even worse. Empty eyes, no expression, just blank. The room went cold, and not just cool, freezing cold. And she suddenly felt this fear hit her. You know, that gut level fear, the kind that doesn't come from your head, it comes from your body, somewhere deeper. She forced herself to look closer. Then she looked down. She couldn't breathe. The woman's feet weren't touching the floor. The girl screamed. She yanked the blanket over her head without thinking. Her heart was pounding out of her chest. She couldn't move, completely frozen. That is when the door opened. What's wrong? What happened? It was her mom, her real mom, wearing normal clothes, not white. The girl finally pulled the blanket down with shaking hands. She looked at the foot of the bed. No one there. Whatever had been standing there was just gone. She told her family what happened, that she saw a woman in white, that her feet weren't on the floor, that she was floating. And, of course, nobody believed her. You were dreaming. You weren't fully awake. Stop thinking scary thoughts. That's what they said. She wanted to believe it was just a dream, too.
Don't move. Here comes La Llorona. I wouldn't have moved because I would have been dead. What the fuck? This guy claims that he has seen La Llorona twice in his lifetime. So he says that there was this one time where they were going to the river because they were going to fish. He says that they usually go around 10 or 11 at nighttime to fish. What they do is they set traps, and they don't like leaving because they want to make sure that their traps work. So typically when they set the traps, they like to lay around the edge and maybe fall asleep or take naps or just wait around. He said it was in that moment where they were all sitting around and they were getting sleepy, so they were about to lay down and go to sleep. But it was also in that moment when they started to hear a cry from afar. He said that he just heard what sounded like a woman crying out, but it just sounded really, really far away from where they were. That's when one of the guys he was with tells everybody, do not move because here comes La Llorona. What do you mean do not move? He says that they were all laying there like together, and they only had one blanket, so they were all like holding at the end of blankets so that they can cover their heads and their bodies, and they're basically fighting to get hidden under that blanket. And again, the guy was like, stop moving, like don't make any sound, here comes La Llorona. And that's when everybody just got very still. He says that they were all fighting to cover their feet, like if the blanket was gonna protect. Actually, the blanket will protect, okay? In my head it will. So again, they're laying right next to the river where they had set the traps, and he says that it was then when they started to hear those cries very close to where they were. He said that they were in kind of an incline, so they were laying down, but they were able to, like, if they wanted to see, they could. He says that he peeked, and what he saw like moving through the river almost looked like a cloud, like something floating. It looked like a cloud to him over the river. He said that they all waited silently for them to like not even hear her from afar, from close by, and ever again. I would have died on the spot. Like, what the hell do you mean don't move? Here comes La Llorona. I would have been dead.
I have a Llorona story time. The person who submitted this story is so terrified by the events that took place on the night that she encountered La Llorona that she made me practically swear that I wasn't going to use her actual name. Which I never would. I would never break that trust. Like, if you guys want to be anonymous, you guys are going to be anonymous. I'm always going to make up names. We're going to call her Lily. In 2006, Lily decided to go visit her family in Mexico and stay at her aunt and uncle's house. Now, her aunt and uncle had 3 daughters that were around Lily's age, which was perfect. The whole day, Lily spent the day with her cousins just hanging out and like catching up. That night, it turned into a big slumber party. All the girls slept in the one room while the mom and dad went and slept in their bedroom. As the night progressed, the girls were doing your typical like slumber party stuff, just like hanging out, having fun, when the scary story like topic came up. And of course, they started talking about La Llorona. Each of the girls started to talk about all of like the local legends of La Llorona and how like many people in the neighborhood had heard La Llorona. This turned the whole atmosphere of the night into like a spooky atmosphere, which made them all want to watch the movie The Nun. After the movie ended, it was getting pretty late, and at this point the girls were actually pretty scared. Like, they were already scared because of like all of the Llorona stories, but like The Nun definitely put them on edge. As they were laying down trying to fall asleep, they start to hear the faint sound of a woman crying. At first they think that maybe they're just imagining it, they're just hearing things, but one by one each girl starts to kind of acknowledge the fact that they can each hear a woman crying. But it wasn't like your typical like wailing cry, it was like a mourning cry, like somebody who was like sobbing like uncontrollably, really thinking that maybe somebody was playing a prank on them or they were just hearing things. They then start to hear dogs howling, like the dogs howling from like the whole neighborhood. It was like the whole neighborhood woke up. This really put all 4 girls on alert, and they're like freaking out at this point. Like, we hear the crying, the dogs are howling, and then out of nowhere it was almost like from a movie scene. Like the wind, like the weather just picks up and the wind is like hitting their house. Like their whole house is shaking from how windy it is outside. One of Lily's cousins decides to kind of creep through one of like the cracks on the windowsill, and she looks underneath and she sees a woman standing there. The woman was standing across from their bedroom window, but it was almost as if the woman was floating. Like her legs weren't actually on the ground. It was like she was kind of floating like up and down. She had a long white dress, but it was all ragged and ripped. She had like long black hair that was half covering her face, and she even got a good look at her face. She said that her face looked like it wasn't even human. Like all of her features were like stretched out. Like it didn't look normal. They all start screaming. They run straight to the parents' room and they wake up the parents. When the parents wake up, the mom starts kind of consoling the girls, trying to get them to calm down, and she starts to pray with them. But the dad gets really angry. Not only did they wake him up, he thinks that there's somebody out there probably playing a prank, like really messing with them. So he's furious. He opens the front door, runs out there, and starts yelling and cursing and screaming and telling whoever it is to get out, to leave my house, like leave my family alone, like you don't belong here, and a bunch of other like words that I can't repeat. Just how everything started out of nowhere with the woman crying and the howling of the dogs and the wind, it just stopped. It was like dead silence. It was almost like somebody like clicked the switch and everything stopped. Even though everyone was relieved that like everything stopped and ended, they were all filled with this sense of dread that they couldn't shake like for days. This is the part that really scares Lily and why she made me swear not to say it was her who submitted the story. 10 days after that night, the dad, you know, the one that went out there yelling and screaming at La Llorona, he passed away in his sleep. Unexpectedly. He had no health issues. There was absolutely nothing wrong with him. He just died. Lily says that she can't prove anything, but she knows what she saw, and she also knows that he confronted her, which is something that you should never do.
My name is Lupita. My dad has probably the best scary story I have ever heard. He once told me about the first time he encountered La Llorona. When he was younger, my dad was the type of kid who wanted to play all day, even if it meant getting in trouble. My grandparents would ground him whenever he didn't listen. He was about 10 years old when this happened. One day, he was outside playing with his neighborhood friends in Michoacan, Mexico. They would spend hours in the street, just being kids. Before he went out that evening, my grandma warned him, "Don't stay up late playing, or else La Llorona will take you away." My dad laughed it off and promised he'd come home early. He was about 5-10 minutes away from home, playing and having fun, when it started getting late. His friends decided to head home because they knew they would get punished if they stayed out too long. But my dad didn't want the night to end, so he stayed behind and kept playing by himself. It was around 10 or 11 at night, almost midnight, when he finally decided to walk home. The streets were dark and quiet, but he wasn't scared. In fact, he felt proud of himself for staying out that late. As he approached his house, he noticed a woman standing near a nearby home. She was facing the wall with her head leaning against it. At first, he didn't think anything of it. As he passed her, he politely said, "Good night, ma'am." She didn't respond. He continued walking until he reached his front door. Just before opening it, he suddenly felt an eerie sensation, like someone was watching him. Slowly, he turned around. That's when he saw La Llorona. She had pale skin, black eyes, and a wide, dark mouth. She was perched on top of a tree, staring directly at him while letting out a horrifying scream. The moment he saw her, he fainted from fear. When he woke up, he was inside the house with my grandma. He told her everything that happened, but instead of sounding surprised, she simply told him that's what happened to children who didn't listen to their parents. My dad immediately apologized and promised he would never stay out late again. And when my grandpa found out what happened, he still punished him for staying out so late. I was 10 years old when my dad first told me this story. Now I'm almost 18, and it still gives me chills every time I think about it.